I'm Jackson Maddox. I'm 38 years old, and at my own brother's wedding, my father stood up in front of 200 people and called me the disgrace of the family. Before I tell you how the bride's own mother, a decorated Navy commander, froze the entire room and turned their triumph into humiliation with a single, perfect salute, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I always find it incredible how far stories like this can travel. It all started on a crisp Tuesday in October. My day had begun at 0500 with a 5-mile run, followed by a series of briefings that could decide the fate of operations half a world away. The air in my Norfolk office was still, smelling faintly of industrial-strength coffee and the salty tang of the Chesapeake Bay. It was a world of order, of consequence, of clear objectives and measurable results. It was the world I had built for myself, brick by disciplined brick. My aide, Lieutenant Commander Simmons, a sharp young officer from Ohio with eyes that missed nothing, entered my office. He moved with a quiet efficiency I appreciated. He didn't speak until he was standing before my desk. "Sir, the preliminary reports on Operation Sea Serpent are on your desk for review," he said. "And this arrived for you by personal courier." He placed a single cream-colored envelope on my blotter. It was thick, heavy, and ornate, a complete alien in my sterile environment of digital correspondence and standard-issue manila folders. "Thank you, Simmons," I said, not looking up from the report. "That will be all." He hesitated for a second, a breach of his usual protocol. "Sir, is everything all right?" I looked up. He was staring at the envelope, his expression carefully neutral, but his curiosity was plain. "Just fine, Lieutenant. Thank you." He nodded and retreated, closing the door softly behind him. I stared at the envelope. The return address was a ghost from a past life. A street in a leafy, affluent Virginia suburb I hadn't set foot on in 6 years. My family home. With a sigh, I slit the envelope open with a letter opener shaped like a naval dirk, a gift from my first command. Inside, the invitation was what I'd expected. My younger brother, Tyler, was getting married. His name and that of his fiancée, Alexis Chun, was scripted in elaborate gold calligraphy. My own name, however, was addressed with a cold, almost weaponized formality that was clearly my father's touch. Vice Admiral Jackson Maddox. It wasn't a name. It was a rank, a title they could neither understand nor truly respect, but one they felt compelled to acknowledge on paper. Then I saw the note, a small piece of stationery tucked into the fold of the invitation. It was my mother's handwriting, a familiar, spiky script that had once signed my report cards. Contained only 2 words. "Behave yourself." 2 words. The same 2 words she'd whispered to me when I was 10. Right before I had to apologize to a neighbor for a window tile had broken with a baseball. The same 2 words she'd hissed at me during our last disastrous Christmas dinner 6 years ago, moments before my father, drunk on scotch and resentment, had accused me of flaunting my success to make him look small. That night ended with a shattered glass against the fireplace and my silent departure into the cold December night. I hadn't been back since. A lesser man would have torn the invitation to shreds. A younger, angrier version of me certainly would have. But the Navy hadn't just given me a career. It had forged me into a strategist. It had taught me that you don't win a war by refusing to fight. You win by choosing your battlefield, controlling the narrative, and executing your plan with absolute precision. This invitation wasn't an olive branch. It was a summons, a challenge. And after 6 years, I was ready to answer it. I buzzed for Simmons. He appeared instantly. "Lieutenant, I need you to do something for me, off the record." "Of course, sir. I need a full, unclassified guest list for the wedding of Tyler Maddox and Alexis Chun. The bride's family is the priority. I'm specifically interested in any military connections, active or retired, particularly anyone associated with naval intelligence." Simmons blinked, the first sign of surprise I'd seen from him in months. "Sir, and book me a commercial flight to Richmond for that weekend," I said, my eyes fixed on the mocking, elegant script of the invitation. "It appears I have a family function to attend." I wasn't going back for reconciliation. I wasn't going back for forgiveness. Those ships had sailed, hit icebergs of their own, and sunk to the bottom of a cold, dark ocean years ago. I was going back to end the war. The quiet, psychological war they had waged against me since I was a child. And this time, I wouldn't be the boy with the broken model ship. I'd be the Admiral, and I was bringing my own fleet. The rental car was an anonymous gray sedan, the kind of car that blends into any highway in America. As I drove the familiar route from Richmond International Airport, memories I had kept locked away in a watertight compartment of my mind began to surface. Virginia in the fall was beautiful, the trees a riot of red and gold, but the scenery was just a backdrop to a past that felt as gray and oppressive as a winter sky. My childhood home wasn't a place of warmth. It was a place of rules. But the rules were different for me and my brother. I was the serious son, the one who lived by logic and discipline. My bedroom was a testament to order. Books arranged by subject, model airplanes built with painstaking precision. Homework completed the day it was assigned. Tyler's room was a whirlwind of chaos. Clothes on the floor, sports equipment piled in a corner, half-finished projects abandoned for the next shiny thing. He was the charming son, the one who lived by impulse and emotion. He could break a rule, flash a smile, and somehow end up the hero of the story. I remember when I was 16. I had spent months preparing for my Naval Academy entrance exams and the physical fitness test. My life was a rigid schedule of studying, running, push-ups, and pull-ups. That same semester, Tyler, who was 14, was failing algebra. My father's solution wasn't to get Tyler a tutor. It was to tell me to spend less time on my military obsession and more time helping my brother. "He just needs a little push, Jackson," my father had said, his tone implying my ambition was a form of selfishness. Family helps family. So I did. I spent hours trying to explain algebraic equations to a brother who was more interested in doodling on his notebook. I ran with him in the mornings, trying to get him in shape for the JV soccer team tryouts. My own training suffered, but I did it, because family helps family. Tyler passed algebra with a C-. He didn't make the soccer team. My reward for helping him was a lecture from my mother about how my intense personality was probably putting too much pressure on him. That summer, when my acceptance letter from the Naval Academy arrived, my father looked at the official envelope, grunted, and said, "Well, I guess that's that then." There was no celebration, no party. That same week, Tyler won a hot dog eating contest at the county fair, and my parents framed the blue ribbon and hung it in the den. That was the core of it. My successes were inconvenient truths, reminders of a path my father hadn't taken, a discipline he lacked. Tyler's trivial victories were celebrated because they were safe. They posed no threat to my father's fragile ego. Pulling into the long gravel driveway, I saw the house. It was a perfect specimen of colonial architecture. A two-story brick facade with white pillars and dark green shutters. It projected an image of stability, of old money, of a happy American family. It was the most convincing lie they had ever told. I got out of the car. The October air was crisp. I was wearing civilian clothes, a dark blazer, gray trousers, and a simple button-down shirt. I had decided against wearing my uniform for the arrival. That was a tool I would deploy later. For now, I would be the son. I would give them one last chance to see me as such. My mother, Margaret, met me at the door. She was still a handsome woman, but her face was etched with fine lines of perpetual dissatisfaction. She wiped her hands on her apron, a nervous habit I remembered well. "Jackson," she said. No hug, no smile, just my name, spoken like a line item on a long list of chores. "You're here. Your room is the same as it always was. Don't make a mess." "Hello, Mother," I said. "It's good to see you, too." The sarcasm was lost on her, or she chose to ignore it. The house smelled the same. Lemon polish, old paper, and a faint, indefinable scent of disappointment. I walked into the living room and the cold knot that had formed in my stomach on Tuesday tightened its grip. The walls were a curated museum of Tyler's life. Tyler at his high school graduation, arm in arm with our parents. Tyler holding a ridiculous trophy from some beer league softball team. Tyler on a ski trip. Tyler and his fiancée, Alexis, smiling in a professionally shot engagement photo on the beach. I scanned every wall, every shelf, every end table. Not one picture of me. It was breathtaking in its thoroughness. I had been systematically, methodically erased from our family's history. It was as if their second son had never been born. My father, Robert, appeared in the doorway of his study. He was holding a glass of amber liquid scotch, his constant companion. He was a retired Navy captain, a man whose career had peaked 20 years ago. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my face, then my shoulders, as if searching for the uniform that wasn't there. "So you came," he said, his voice a low growl. It wasn't a greeting. It was an accusation. "You sent an invitation," I replied, my voice even. "Don't get smart, Jackson," he snapped. "You know the rules. This weekend is about Tyler, not about you. Don't you dare pull any of your stunts." I had to resist the urge to laugh. My stunts had included graduating with honors from the academy, successfully commanding a warship, and achieving a rank he had only ever dreamed of. To him, my entire life was a stunt pulled for the sole purpose of embarrassing him. The rehearsal dinner that evening was at a stuffy country club. It was the public unveiling of my status as family pariah. The seating chart placed me at table 9, a small round table in a dark corner, sandwiched between a potted fern and the swinging doors to the kitchen. My table mates were a handful of my parents' neighbors who had been invited out of obligation and who clearly had no idea what to say to me. My Uncle Roy, my father's younger, louder brother, came by and slapped me hard on the back. "Jackie boy, still playing with those big gray boats, huh? Don't sink any of 'em," he roared, spraying flecks of spittle. My Aunt Patricia, his wife, leaned over to one of the neighbors and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. He was always such a strange, serious boy. Had some issues, you know? I ate my overcooked chicken, the rhythmic swoosh thump of the kitchen doors providing a depressing soundtrack to the meal. Then, across the room, I saw him, Captain Marcus Rivera, my best friend, my brother in all the ways that mattered. He was a guest of the Chin family. His wife had gone to law school with Alexis. Our eyes locked. I saw the anger flash on his face. He knew my family history, but seeing the theory put into such brutal practice was another thing entirely. He made a move to get up, to cross the room and join me in my exile, but I gave him the smallest, most imperceptible shake of my head. "Not yet. Wait for the signal." He understood. He was a warrior. He knew the importance of timing. He sat back down, but his eyes never left me, a silent promise of support. Later, as the dinner was winding down, I stood by the bar, getting a glass of water. Tyler was nearby, surrounded by his groomsmen, basking in their adulation. "Your brother cleans up okay?" one of them said, nodding in my direction. "What's his deal, anyway?" "My dad was in the army," he said, "making Admiral is basically impossible." Tyler laughed, a dismissive, arrogant sound. "Vice Admiral, and it's mostly political. He's a paper pusher in D.C., spends his days making sure some senator's coffee is hot. It's not like it's a real command. Besides, look at him. The guy has no life, never even been married, no kids. What's the point of a big salary and a fancy title if you have no one to share it with? I'm the one who's really winning. I've got Alexis. I have a real life." I just stood there, letting the words hit me. It wasn't just an insult. It was their official story, the one they told themselves and the world to make sense of my life, to diminish it, to make it smaller than theirs. I walked out onto the terrace. The cool night air felt clean. Marcus joined me a moment later. "Jack, this is worse than you ever told me," he said, his voice tight. "This is a deliberate, coordinated campaign of humiliation." "I know what it is," I said, looking up at the stars. "Why? Why are you letting them do it? One word from you, one call to the right person, and you could make their lives very, very uncomfortable." I turned to face him, the dim light from the clubhouse casting long shadows on the stone patio. "Because Marcus," I said, and a cold, hard smile touched my lips for the first time that night. To win a battle, you first have to let your enemy believe they are winning. You let them overextend their lines. You let them get arrogant. You let them reveal their position. They think they're throwing a wedding, but what they're really doing is setting the stage for their own court-martial. And I'm going to be the presiding judge. Marcus stared at me, a slow grin spreading across his own face. You have a plan. I always have a plan, I confirmed. The game was afoot, and I was finally ready to make my move. The morning of the wedding arrived with a brilliant, cloudless sky. It was the kind of perfect autumn day that belongs on a postcard. In the Maddox family home, however, a low-pressure system was building. I had laid out my dress-white uniform the night before, pressing it myself with a travel steamer. I didn't trust leaving it to anyone else in this house. I had also, as a matter of course, brought a complete backup uniform. In my world, redundancy wasn't pessimism. It was professionalism. You always have a contingency. Always. My foresight paid off. I went downstairs for a cup of coffee, and when I returned to my room, I found the door ajar. On the pristine white chest of my uniform jacket, there was a large, ugly splash of dark red. A glass of what smelled like Merlot sat on the nightstand, a silent, damning piece of evidence. My Aunt Patricia appeared in the doorway, a look of theatrical horror on her face. Her son, my 8-year-old cousin, peeked out from behind her legs. "Oh, my heavens, Jackson," Patricia gasped. "Billy, did you do this?" "Oh, you naughty boy." The boy just giggled. "I am so sorry, Jackson. You know how children are. They get into everything. I hope it's not ruined." The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. This was no accident. This was a coordinated attack. A petty act of sabotage designed to fluster me, to diminish me, to literally tarnish the symbol of my life's work. They wanted me to show up looking stained and disheveled, a physical manifestation of the disgrace they believed me to be. I didn't even glance at the stained jacket. I looked directly at Patricia, my eyes as cold and calm as a winter sea. "It's quite all right, Aunt Patricia," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "Thank you for the reminder. In my line of work, we have a saying, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. I always come prepared." I walked over to my garment bag, unzipped it, and pulled out the identical, immaculate backup uniform. I held it up. As I said, prepared. The smug look on her face faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion and something else. A tiny spark of fear. This was not the reaction she had expected. I wasn't flustered. I wasn't angry. I was in control. She mumbled something about getting Billy ready and scurried away. As I put on the fresh uniform, I felt the familiar ritual calm me. The precise alignment of the ribbons. The satisfying click of the buttons. The weight of the fabric on my shoulders. This uniform wasn't a costume. It was a statement of fact. It represented 2 decades of discipline, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. It was a world away from the cheap theatrics and petty jealousies of this house. The next front in their war of attrition opened on the sprawling, perfectly manicured lawn of the country club, where the pre-ceremony photographs were being taken. The photographer, a harried man in a tight suit, was clearly taking his direction from my mother, who was acting as the unofficial and tyrannical director of the shoot. "Okay, parents of the groom with the happy couple," she called out, her voice bright and brittle. Robert and Margaret beamed as they flanked Tyler and Alexis. "Perfect. Now, just the siblings." My mother's eyes met mine for a split second. A silent challenge. I began to step forward. "Oh no, not you, dear," she said quickly, waving a dismissive hand. "We meant the bride's siblings with the groom." A little welcome to the family shot. It was a masterful, cruel improvisation. Again and again, they found a reason to exclude me. The cousins, the grandparents, the entire Maddox clan. I was left standing on the periphery, watching them construct a perfect family album from which I was conspicuously absent. It was a public declaration that I was not one of them. After several minutes of this polite, smiling humiliation, I saw a figure detach from the growing crowd of guests and walk toward me with purpose. It was Commander Elena Chen, the mother of the bride. She was a formidable presence in her own dress uniform, a woman whose calm demeanor concealed a mind as sharp as a shard of glass. We had served together on a high-stakes joint task force in the Persian Gulf, a pressure cooker environment where you learn the true measure of a person. We knew and respected each other. "Admiral," she said, her voice low and steady as she stopped beside me. She didn't salute. That would have been a breach of protocol in this social setting. But her posture was one of unmistakable professional respect. "It seems the official record of this event is being curated." "An astute observation, Commander," I replied, my eyes still fixed on the laughing group. "My daughter is a good woman," she said, her gaze softening as she watched Alexis, who was smiling, oblivious to the drama unfolding at the edge of the lawn. "She's a corporate lawyer, bright, principled. She knows nothing of this dynamic. The story she was told is that you're a difficult, estranged brother who disapproves of her marriage to Tyler. The official story, their propaganda. It painted me as the villain, the cold-hearted careerist who couldn't be happy for his family's joy." "Thank you for the intelligence, Elena," I said, using her first name for the first time. "It's a critical piece of the operational picture." She nodded, understanding my meaning completely. "Let me know if you require support, Admiral. My team is your team. Always." "Understood, Commander," I said. The support I required was not a rescue. It was simply for her to be who she was, a witness whose credibility was unimpeachable. The ceremony itself was a beautiful piece of theater. I sat in a pew at the very back of the church, an island of white in a sea of dark suits and pastel dresses. I watched Tyler stand at the altar, looking every bit the handsome, successful son my parents had always wanted. I watched my father puff out his chest with pride. I watched my mother dab at a tear that I knew wasn't real, and I felt a profound sense of peace. The emotional connection had been severed long ago. All that remained was a tactical problem that required a final, decisive solution. At the reception, the final insult, the one meant to break me, was delivered with elegant calligraphic precision. The seating chart was a massive, ornate board at the entrance to the grand ballroom. Table 1, the wedding party. Tables 2 and 3, close family. I scanned the list of neatly printed names. Down the list, and again. My name was not on it. Then I saw it. At the very bottom of the board, below the floor plan, almost an afterthought, was a small, crudely handwritten addition in black marker. J. Maddox, Table 18. I didn't need to find the table to know where it was. My strategic assessment of the room had already identified the worst possible location. Table 18 was a small two-top, crammed into an alcove next to the main service doors to the kitchen. It was a place for a vendor, not a guest. I walked to the table and sat down. The doors swung open, blasting me with a wave of heat, noise, and the smell of garlic. A waiter nearly ran into my chair. It was perfect. They had made their final move. They had pushed all their pieces forward, leaving their king completely exposed. They thought they had checkmated me. They had no idea they had just walked into my trap. Marcus appeared a moment later, his face a mask of cold fury. "That's it, Jack. We're leaving," he said, his voice a low hiss. "This isn't just an insult. This is a declaration of war. Let's go." My treat. Best steakhouse in Richmond. "Sit down, Marcus," I said calmly, taking the napkin and folding it into a perfect, crisp square on my lap. "Sit down? Why in God's name would you stay here and take this?" I looked up at him, my eyes hard. "Because I'm not taking it. I'm documenting it. I need a witness. And right now you're it." My decision was made. I would endure this last, pathetic act of defiance. I would absorb their final volley, because the counterstrike I had planned would be all the more devastating for it. The storm hadn't just begun. I was about to become the storm. The ballroom hummed with the manufactured joy of 100 conversations. From my exile at Table 18, I had a panoramic view of the battlefield. It was like being in a command center, observing enemy movements from a distance. I was isolated, but I was also omniscient. I watched my father, Robert, He was table hopping, a glass of scotch permanently attached to his hand. He was playing the part of the proud patriarch, slapping backs, laughing too loudly. He stopped for a long time at a table occupied by a man I recognized from the pre-wedding intelligence Simmons had gathered for me. A local real estate mogul, a man whose name on a building was my father's idea of true success. My father was animated, pointing, gesturing, no doubt trying to impress this man with his powerful connections and his wonderful family. It was all a performance, a desperate attempt to shore up his own fragile sense of self-worth. I watched my mother, Margaret. She was the operations social director, gliding between tables with a serene smile plastered on her face. She would touch an arm here, laugh at a joke there, ensuring the grand illusion of the perfect family remained intact. She was the chief propagandist, the one who had spent a lifetime spinning a narrative of Tyler's brilliance and my strangeness. Her real fear, I knew, wasn't that I would fail, but that I would succeed so spectacularly that her carefully constructed world would be exposed as a lie. And I watched my brother, Tyler. He was on the dance floor with his beautiful new wife, Alexis. He was a good dancer, I had to give him that. He moved with a practiced, easy grace that had always come naturally to him. But even from across the room, I could see the subtle tells. The way his eyes darted to our father's table every few moments, seeking approval. The slight tightness in his smile. He was performing, too. He was playing the role of the happy, successful groom, the golden child who had won the ultimate prize. But it was a fragile victory. His entire sense of self was borrowed, a reflection of our parents' ambitions. Without their approval, he was nothing. Marcus sat with me, a silent pillar of loyalty. He had pulled a chair over from his assigned table, a small but significant act of rebellion. It created an odd little tableau. The two uniformed officers, one a captain, one a vice admiral, sitting in the worst seats in the house. It did not go unnoticed. I saw my father shoot a dark, venomous look in our direction. He couldn't stand it. The sight of me with a friend, a peer, a brother in arms. It was a crack in his narrative of my isolation. "He looks like he wants to have you court-martialed for enjoying yourself," Marcus murmured, swirling the wine in his glass. "Control is his drug of choice," I replied, my voice low. "My very existence is a challenge to his authority. He can't stand that I built a life, a career, a reputation, completely outside of his sphere of influence." My gaze swept the room and met Commander Chen's. She was seated with her family and Admiral Thompson, the retired but still immensely respected four-star officer. She gave me a brief, almost imperceptible nod. It was all the confirmation I needed. The key players were aware of the situation. They were watching. They were my strategic assets waiting to be deployed. After the main course plates were cleared, a tuxedoed DJ stepped up to the microphone. "All right, everyone, let's give it up for our happy couple, Tyler and Alexis. And now it's time for a few special toasts from our wedding party." The air in the room shifted. This was the main event. The best man, a lanky guy from Tyler's fraternity, gave a rambling speech that was more about his own college exploits than it was about the groom. Then the maid of honor, Alexis's younger sister, gave a genuinely sweet and touching toast that brought a tear to the bride's eye. Then, the DJ announced, "And now, let's hear from the proud father of the groom, Mr. Robert Maddox." My father took the stage, beaming. He gave a short, generic speech about how proud he was of his son Tyler, how wonderful Alexis was, and how happy he was to welcome her into the family. He didn't mention my name. Of course not. He finished, and as the applause died down, he held up his hand. "But before I go," he said, a sly grin on his face, "my son Tyler also wanted to say a few words." Tyler practically bounded onto the stage, taking the microphone from our father. The spotlight, which had been on the head table, swung around the room, hunting. It swept past me once, then came back, pinning me in its bright, unforgiving glare. The operator had his instructions. "Wow, what a day!" Tyler began, his voice full of energy. "Thank you all for being here. It means the world to us." He paused, letting his eyes find me in the darkness. I want to give a special thank you to my big brother, Jackson, for making the trip. I know how busy he is with all his important work." The room fell silent. This wasn't a toast. It was an ambush. I could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on me. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I let him have the stage. A good commander knows when to let the enemy advance into the kill zone. I was in the eye of the storm, a place of perfect calm, of absolute focus. I had laid the bait. Now it was time to see them take it. The spotlight was a hot, white circle, isolating me from the rest of the room. The silence was absolute, a vacuum waiting to be filled. Tyler stood on the stage, soaking in the power of the moment. He was the prosecutor, the judge, and the jury, and he was about to deliver his verdict on my entire life. "You know," he continued, his voice dripping with the kind of mock sincerity he had perfected as a child, "it's funny. People see the uniform, they see the stars, and they get all impressed. They think my brother is some kind of action hero, you know? Like something out of a movie." He let out a short, derisive chuckle. A few of his friends at the front tables, the ones who had been in on the joke for years, laughed along with him. "But the truth is," Tyler leaned into the microphone, his voice becoming a conspiratorial whisper that still carried throughout the silent ballroom. "His job now is mostly administrative. It's a desk job, a lot of paperwork. Think of him less as a warrior and more as, well, a doorman for the Navy. A very high-ranking, well-dressed doorman, but a doorman nonetheless. He just guards doors for politicians now." The laughter that followed was bigger this time. It rippled through the room, starting with Tyler's sycophants and spreading to the extended family. The aunts and uncles who had always viewed my discipline as arrogance and my success as a personal affront. They were laughing at the absurdity of it all. The strange, serious boy playing soldier, finally put in his place. He had reduced my command, my responsibility for the lives and safety of thousands of American sailors, to a punchline. I remained still, my face a mask of neutrality. I reached for my glass of water, my movements slow and deliberate. I would not give them the satisfaction of a reaction. My father, Robert, couldn't resist the opportunity to land the killing blow. He pushed his chair back and stood up, his face flushed with scotch and victory. His voice, years of resentment behind it, boomed across the room. "He's just being modest, Tyler," Robert shouted, getting a fresh wave of laughter. He paused for dramatic effect, then delivered the line he had been waiting 30 years to say in public. "In reality, he's the disgrace of this family." That was it, the final, definitive statement. The laughter exploded. It was a roar of mockery, of derision, of collective relief that the family's black sheep had finally been officially branded. I saw the look of pure, unadulterated triumph on my father's face. He had won. In front of everyone, he had reduced me to nothing. I set my water glass down with a soft click. And then I stood up. The laughter sputtered and died, replaced by a tense, curious silence. The outcast was on his feet. The disgrace was about to speak. What could he possibly say? I didn't look at my father. I didn't look at my brother. My eyes found the real estate mogul my father had been fawning over all night. I addressed him, but my voice was calm, clear, and projected to every corner of the room. "My father is entitled to his opinion." I began, my tone as level and steady as a ship in calm seas. "And my brother is right. My work does involve doors." I paused, letting the tension build. "But he's mistaken about the nature of my work. You see, the doors I am responsible for are the ones that keep this country safe at night. The doors I guard are the ones that our enemies pray they can open, and the ones that families like yours sleep peacefully behind, never knowing the dangers they hold back. The people I am responsible for, they outrank everyone in this room, combined." A low, uneasy murmur swept through the crowd. This was not the response of a shamed man. This was a direct, confident rebuttal. Robert's face contorted from triumph to confusion, then to rage. I then turned my head slightly, my gaze locking with Marcus. It was the signal. Marcus stood, his bearing every inch the decorated Navy captain he was. "Admiral, I apologize for the interruption," he said, his voice ringing with formal curiosity. "But a moment ago you mentioned to me that you had recently been awarded a commendation for your last command. A rather significant one, I believe you said. I assume the details of the operation are classified." The room was now so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the glasses. I gave a slight nod. "The operational details remain classified, Captain. The award itself, however, was declassified and entered into the public record last month." The trap was sprung. It was a perfect, professional, and utterly defensible maneuver. I wasn't boasting. I was simply confirming a fact in response to a direct question from a fellow officer in a public setting. "Public record?" Marcus said, a look of theatrical interest on his face as he pulled out his smartphone. "Well then, the Navy's public affairs portal should have the citation. It's all open source." His fingers began to tap on the screen. The only sound was the faint clicking of the virtual keyboard. "What is the meaning of this?" my father sputtered, his authority evaporating. "This is a wedding. Sit down." No one paid him any attention. All eyes were on Marcus. "Ah, got it," Marcus announced, his voice carrying the weight of authority. He cleared his throat and began to read from the screen. "Official citation for the award of the Navy Distinguished Service Medal to Vice Admiral Jackson Maddox." A collective, audible gasp swept the room. Even the civilians knew that the Distinguished Service Medal was no small thing. It was an honor reserved for the highest echelons of leadership, for service of profound national importance. Marcus's voice grew stronger, each word a hammer blow to the narrative my family had so carefully constructed. "For exceptionally meritorious service in a position of great responsibility as Commander Joint Task Force Neptune Spear, Vice Admiral Maddox displayed brilliant strategic leadership, personal courage, and unwavering resolve during Operation Silent Tide. His decisive actions, in the face of a numerically superior and technologically advanced adversary, directly resulted in the neutralization of a critical threat to national security and the preservation of over 200 American lives, including the forward intelligence team led by Commander Elena Chun." The name, Commander Elena Chun, hit the room like a lightning strike. Every single head whipped around to stare at the mother of the bride. And then the final devastating move. Commander Elena Chen, in her immaculate dress white uniform, pushed her chair back and stood. She walked with a calm, deliberate purpose from her table, across the dance floor, and stopped 2 feet in front of me. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her eyes met mine, filled with a warrior's respect. She came to attention, her back ramrod straight, and executed a perfect, crisp, and utterly silent salute. A beat later, from across the room, Admiral Thompson, the revered 4-star, rose to his feet and rendered his own salute. Then Marcus. Then 3 other men, older gentlemen I now recognized as retired officers, stood as one and saluted. The laughter was a distant memory. The mockery had been annihilated. All that remained was a stunning, reverberating silence. I finally allowed myself to look at my family. My mother's face was a crumbling mask of horror. My father was frozen solid, his mouth agape, a statue of impotent rage. And Tyler, the golden child, the star of the show, stood on the stage, his face the color of ash. He swayed once, his eyes rolled back in his head, and he crumpled to the floor in a dead faint. The thud of his body hitting the stage was punctuated by the sharp crack of a champagne glass slipping from my father's nerveless hand and shattering on the floor. Alexis, the bride, a brilliant lawyer suddenly faced with a case of fraud and deceit she could never have imagined, looked from her unconscious husband, to her saluting mother, to me, the man they had called a disgrace. Her face was a canvas of pure, dawning horror. The truth hadn't just come out. It had detonated. And it had leveled their entire world. The implosion of the wedding reception was swift and total. Medics rushed to the stage for Tyler. Guests, no longer pretending to celebrate, gathered in stunned, whispering clusters, their eyes darting between my family's funereal table and me. The narrative had been irrevocably shattered, and a new, far more compelling one had taken its place. I didn't stay to watch the cleanup. My mission was complete. Marcus and I walked out into the cool night air, leaving the chaos behind. The silence in the parking lot was a welcome relief. "Well," Marcus finally said, letting out a long, low whistle. "For a guy who guards doors, you sure know how to blow them off their hinges." A rare, genuine smile touched my lips. "It's about applying pressure to structural weaknesses, my friend." They built a faulty structure. The next morning, I was methodically packing my garment bag in my quiet hotel room. My phone buzzed. The caller ID read, "Mother." I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. On the fifth try, I answered. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. "I'm in the lobby," she said, her voice a strained, ragged whisper. "We need to talk. Please, Jackson. 5 minutes." I sighed. It was time for the final debrief. I met her in a deserted corner of the hotel lounge, a place of beige carpets and generic art. She looked 10 years older than she had the day before. Her eyes were puffy and red, her posture defeated. But she hadn't come to seek forgiveness. She had come to negotiate the terms of surrender. She tried a different tactic first, guilt. "How could you, Jackson?" she began, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. "How could you do that to your brother? On his wedding day, you humiliated him. You ruined everything." I just stared at her, my silence a more powerful rebuttal than any argument. I let her run out of steam. When she was finished, her shoulders slumped. The anger deflated, replaced by a desperate plea. "You have to fix this," she said, shifting to her real objective. "You need to release some kind of statement. Tell people it was a misunderstanding. A joke that went too far. Robert's reputation in the community is ruined. The Chens are furious. You have to do something." I reached into the leather briefcase at my feet and pulled out a thin file folder. I slid it across the polished wood table. It made a soft, final sound. "What is this?" she asked, her hand trembling as she reached for it. "An after-action report," I said. She opened it. Inside were the documents I knew by heart. Copies of the 3 anonymous ethics complaints that had been filed against me over the past 10 years. Each one had arrived like a torpedo in the night, right before a critical promotion board. Each was filled with vicious lies and half-truths, alleging everything from professional misconduct to moral failings. Each had triggered a stressful internal investigation that, while ultimately clearing my name, had cast a shadow of doubt over my career and cost me valuable time and momentum. The final page of the file was the one that mattered most. It was a 2-page report from a forensic linguistic analyst I had hired privately 6 months ago. The report concluded with a 98.6% degree of certainty that the author of all 3 venomous, career-threatening complaints was the same person. The analysis was brutally specific, breaking down sentence structure, punctuation habits, and the repeated use of certain archaic phrases. "Forensic linguistics," I explained softly, my voice as calm and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. "It's a fascinating field. They can match anonymous texts to an author's known writings with incredible accuracy. In this case, the known writings were the dozens of letters you sent me during my first 2 years at the academy. Back when you still thought I was worth writing to." She stared at the report, her face turning a ghastly shade of pale. Her hand flew to her mouth. The evidence was absolute. It had been her, my own mother. She had systematically tried to destroy the one thing in the world I had built for myself. I was scared," she finally whispered, the words catching in her throat. "Your father, after he was passed over for his own promotion, he became so bitter, so angry, seeing you succeed where he failed. It was like pouring salt in the wound every single day. I thought if I just slowed you down, he would be easier to live with. I did it to keep the peace. I did it for the family." "No," I said, my voice as hard and cold as steel. "You did it for yourself. You chose the path of least resistance. You sacrificed your son to appease the ego of a weak man. You chose to manage a monster instead of standing up to him." I stood up, my chair making a quiet scraping sound on the floor. There will be no statement. There will be no fixing this. You built this life. Now you get to live in it. Don't contact me again. As I turned to walk away, a frail but unbent figure emerged from an armchair in the corner, where she had been sitting unnoticed. My grandmother, Vivian. She had heard everything. She walked slowly, deliberately, past me and stopped in front of her daughter. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence of the lounge like a razor. "I watched you do it, Margaret," Vivian said. Her eyes filled not with anger, but with a profound, bottomless disappointment. "For 30 years, I watched you praise the hollow sun and punish the solid one. I watched you choose the comfort of a lie over the difficulty of the truth." She shook her head, a small, sad gesture. "You tended to the wrong garden, and now you see what has grown." That was the last time I saw or spoke to my mother. The calls started trickling in a few days later. A tearful voicemail from my cousin Eliza, apologizing for her weakness. A clumsy, self-serving call from Uncle Roy, attempting to rewrite history by claiming he'd always been on my side. I deleted them without a second thought. Then, a call came from a number I didn't recognize. It was Alexis Chen. Her voice was crisp, clear, and all business. "Admiral Maddox, this is Alexis Chen. I wanted to inform you personally that I have filed for an annulment of my marriage to Tyler Maddox," she said. "My lawyer agrees that there are clear grounds of fraud. I was induced into a marriage contract under a web of deceit and false pretenses regarding the character and standing of the Maddox family." "I'm sorry for what you've been through, Alexis," I said, and I meant it. "I'm the one who's sorry," she replied, her professional tone softening for a moment. "I'm a lawyer. I'm trained to see through lies. I can't believe I was so blind. The things they said about you, the way they treated you, no one deserves that." We talked for nearly an hour. She described the utter meltdown that had occurred after I left the reception. The screaming matches between Tyler and Robert. The way her own mother, Elena, had calmly informed Robert that any social or professional association between the Chen and Maddox families was permanently terminated. It was a sad, pathetic tale of a rotten structure collapsing under the weight of its own lies. The final communication was a rambling, 2-minute voicemail from my father, left at 3 in the morning. It was a pathetic tirade of excuses, blame, and self-pity. He blamed me. He blamed Tyler. He blamed the Navy. He blamed the world. The 2 words he never said were, "I'm sorry." I deleted the message without listening to the end. They were no longer my burden to carry. They were just ghosts, fading echoes from a life I had finally, decisively, left behind. The war was over. The long, quiet work of building the peace was about to begin. The 6 months that followed the wedding were a period of quiet, deliberate reconstruction. The demolition had been loud and spectacular, but the process of building something new from the rubble was a slower, more meaningful endeavor. A few weeks after the event, I received a formal call from Admiral Thompson. He was an old friend of my grandfather's and had taken a quiet interest in my career over the years. He offered me a new position at the Pentagon, a significant promotion to a role overseeing a newly created ethics and leadership development program for the Navy's Senior Officer Corps. "After the masterclass you gave in strategic character defense, Jackson," he'd said, his voice rumbling with amusement, "I can't think of a single person in the entire fleet better qualified to teach it. You lived it. It was a tremendous honor, the pinnacle of a career. A few years ago, I would have accepted without a second's hesitation. But the experience with my family had changed my perspective. It had recalibrated my definition of service. My battle hadn't been with the institution of the Navy. The Navy, with its clear rules and meritocratic structure, had been my salvation. My battle had been against a more insidious enemy, the quiet, soul-crushing poison of family betrayal, a type of psychological warfare that could cripple a service member's spirit more completely than any foreign adversary. I saw a different need, a different front line where I was uniquely qualified to serve. I respectfully declined the Pentagon position. Instead, I took the most significant strategic risk of my life. I submitted my resignation from the U.S. Navy. After 20 years of service, it was the hardest decision I'd ever made. But I knew it was the right one. With a significant portion of my life savings, the proceeds from some wise investments, and a clear, unwavering mission, I started a nonprofit foundation. I called it the Resilience Foundation. Its purpose was singular and deeply personal: to provide confidential support, pro bono legal advice, and expert counseling for active duty service members and veterans whose careers and mental well-being were being actively undermined by toxic family dynamics. We would help them fight back against financial sabotage, parents draining a deployed soldier's bank account, spouses racking up debt. We would help them counter emotional blackmail and the kind of reputation-destroying lies that had been used against me. Commander Elena Chun was the first person I called. I asked her to be the vice chair of the board of directors. She accepted immediately. "It's the most important mission I've ever been offered, Jackson," she'd said. Marcus Rivera joined as well, heading up our outreach programs. We opened a small, unassuming office in Alexandria, Virginia. At first, the response was a trickle. People were hesitant, afraid. Then, a few brave souls came forward. We helped a young Marine whose parents were trying to get him a dishonorable discharge because he had defied their wishes to join the military. We helped a female Air Force pilot whose ex-husband was threatening to fight for full custody of their children, using her deployment schedule against her. Word began to spread through the tight-knit military community. The trickle became a flood. I had thought my story was an anomaly, a uniquely dysfunctional situation. I quickly, and sadly, learned that it was just one story among thousands. I had found my new command. One evening, about a year after the foundation opened, I was working late, reviewing a particularly difficult case file. A package was delivered by courier. It was a heavy, square box. Inside, cushioned in foam, was a bottle of 25-year-old single malt scotch, the kind my father had always coveted but never bought for himself. Beneath it was a single sheet of heavy cream-colored stationery, the same kind his wedding invitation had been printed on. The letter was handwritten. "Jackson, I saw an interview you did on a news program about the foundation. You were talking about moral courage. You said that sometimes the most dangerous attacks don't come from the front, but from your own rear flank. I didn't realize how high you had climbed, because I was too busy looking down. I spent your whole life thinking you had abandoned us. I see now that we are the ones who abandoned you. Robert, it wasn't an apology. It wasn't a request for forgiveness. It was a confession, written in the stilted, proud language of a man who was incapable of uttering the words, 'I am sorry.' It was the closest he would ever come to admitting the truth. I didn't respond. I put the unopened bottle of scotch in my office cabinet and kept the letter. It was a historical document now, a record of a war that was finally truly over. The anniversary of the foundation's opening was a quiet affair. We held a small reception in our new, larger headquarters for staff, donors, and some of the families we had helped. As I was speaking with Elena, my assistant approached me, her expression apologetic. "Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there is a man here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment. He says his name is Tyler." I turned, and there he was, standing hesitantly in the archway of the main hall, looking lost and out of place. The year had not been kind to him. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a deep, weary exhaustion. He was thin, his expensive suit hanging on him like a costume. "Can I talk to you?" he asked, his voice so quiet I could barely hear him over the gentle buzz of the reception. I led him back to the quiet solitude of my office. He collapsed into one of the leather chairs facing my desk, not looking at me, but staring at the wall behind me. It was covered in photographs, not of family, but of the life I had built. My command crew on the bridge of my last ship, a group photo from a Foundation charity run, a picture of me shaking hands with a young sailor we had helped get his life back on track. "My divorce from Alexis is final," he said, his voice flat and numb. "Her lawyer was a shark. She got the house, the car, everything. She deserved it." He let out a dry, rattling laugh that held no humor. "Dad barely speaks to me. He blames me for everything. For fainting. For not being strong enough to handle you. For embarrassing him. Why are you here, Tyler? I asked, my voice direct but not unkind. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were the eyes of a lost child. They were filled with a desperate, pathetic honesty I had never seen in him before. I came to tell you something. After Grandma Vivian passed away, we had to go through her things for the funeral and the estate. Alexis was still helping me then. He took a shaky breath, his hands twisting in his lap. She left you everything, Jack. The house, her stocks, a significant inheritance. The estate lawyer has been trying to find you. This was news, but I could tell it wasn't the point. There was more. That's not why I'm here, he whispered, his voice cracking. In her safe deposit box, there were old letters. Letters between her and Grandpa, from back when Dad was a young officer. He stared down at his own trembling hands. Dad was on the fast track. He was up for a major command, a career-making promotion. But he was passed over. There was an incident, the letters said. A serious ethics violation involving government funds. Killed his career. It's why he never made it past captain. He buried it. He spent his whole life being ashamed of it. And there it was. The final, missing piece of the puzzle. The origin story of the monster. My father's lifelong resentment, his vicious, targeted bitterness toward me, wasn't just simple jealousy. It was a projection of his own secret, profound shame. He couldn't stand the sight of my success because it was a living, breathing monument to his own failure. He called me a disgrace to drown out the voice in his own head that was screaming the same thing at him. Tears began to stream down Tyler's face. He didn't even try to wipe them away. All my life, he choked out, the words torn from him. Everything I did, every lie I told, every time I hurt you, it was for his approval. I just wanted him to be proud of me, but he never was. He just used me as a shield to hide his own shame. He looked up at me, his face a ruin of regret. How do I fix it, Jack? How do I fix me? I don't even know who I am without him. How do you become a good person? I looked at my brother, the golden child, now just a broken man in an expensive suit, and I felt the last ember of anger in my heart finally go cold, leaving behind not forgiveness, but a vast, empty pity. He wasn't my rival. He wasn't my enemy. He was just the final casualty of a war he never understood. I didn't offer him a hug or easy words of comfort. That would have been a disservice. He didn't need a savior. He needed a starting point. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a business card. It belonged to a therapist, one of the best in the DC area, a man our foundation worked with who specialized in complex family trauma. You don't just become a good person, Tyler, I said, holding out the card. It's a mission. It requires a plan, discipline, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. And it's a mission you have to command yourself. Your journey starts here. He took the card as if it were a lifeline. He held it in his trembling hand and looked at me, and for the first time in our entire lives, I think he finally saw me not as a brother or a rival, but simply as a man who had found his own way out of the darkness. Another year has passed. The seasons have turned. The world keeps moving. The Resilience Foundation has grown beyond anything I could have imagined. We have a staff of 20, a network of volunteers across the country, and have helped over 500 service members and their families navigate the dark and treacherous waters of their own private wars. We are doing good work. It is the most important command I have ever had. I never heard from Tyler again. I don't know if he ever called that therapist. I hope he did. But his journey, his war, is his own to fight. I have my own peace to maintain. The house my grandmother left me in her inheritance, the one filled with so many ghosts, I sold it. The moment the sale was final, I felt a weight I didn't even know I was still carrying lift from my shoulders. I took every penny of the proceeds and established the Vivian Maddox Scholarship Fund, providing full-ride college funds for the children of enlisted sailors who demonstrate exceptional character. It was a way to turn the poisoned soil of my past into a garden for someone else's future. From the house, I kept only one thing. My grandfather's old brass compass, the one Vivian had pressed into my hand before the wedding. It sits on the corner of my desk today, a silent, steady reminder to always know my own true north. My life is quiet now, but it is not empty. It is full of purpose. The ghosts of Robert, Margaret, and the boy Tyler used to be have been faced, understood, and finally, granted a dishonorable discharge from my life. Just last week, I was walking along the Potomac River, the Jefferson Memorial gleaming white across the water. I was with a young Marine captain, a bright officer whose career had almost been derailed by a possessive, manipulative father who had tried to sabotage his security clearance. We were just walking and I was listening, a skill I've come to value more than the ability to give orders. After a long silence, the young captain looked over at me. His eyes filled with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "Sir," he asked hesitantly, "is it true what the people at the Foundation say about you? That you really were a vice admiral?" I stopped walking and looked out at the river. A tour boat glided past, its wake gently rocking the water. The sun was low in the sky, painting the clouds in shades of orange and deep purple. For a fleeting moment, I saw a reflection on the water's surface, not of the man in the simple blue polo shirt and khakis I was today, but of the man in the immaculate dress white uniform, the 3 silver stars on his shoulders shining in the sun. I thought of the long, painful, and ultimately victorious journey from that quiet boy with the shattered model aircraft carrier to the man who had stood alone in that ballroom, unbowed and unbroken. A genuine smile, easy and unforced, spread across my face. I said, my voice quiet, but steady and sure. Once. But now, I'm just someone who decided not to disappear. The young captain nodded slowly, a look of profound understanding on his face. He didn't need to say anything else. We stood there for a moment, 2 warriors from different generations, bound by a shared, unspoken truth. Then, we turned and continued our walk, talking not about the battles of the past, but about the promise of the future. His future, and the quiet, unshakable peace of my own. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way, and maybe gave you a little bit of strength if you're fighting your own battles. Have you ever had to fight to define your own worth against the story someone else tried to write for you? Share your experience in the comments below. I read them all. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's next.